Hey everybody, and welcome back to the archaeology world. Today we're going to ruin another structure, the Desert Temple. But before we get going into this whole ruining process of this Desert Temple, I do want to address some comments about the last episode where we ruined the Jungle Temple, specifically about this block. Now, this block is cobblestone. Everyone knows it. It is made up of, you guessed it, cobblestones. I mean, it should be pretty obvious that these are cobblestones. It's called cobblestone. See, right there, it says cobblestone. But in the real world, if you were to try to make a 1 meter by 1 meter block of cobblestones, you'd end up with a pile. It would just be a big pile of cobblestone, right? In order to make a block like this of cobblestone, and specifically to make something like this, you can't just do this with, river rocks and cobbles. This whole thing would fall apart. In order to do something like this, what you need cobblestones and a binder, a thing that binds them together to make this a structural element. So in the real world, when we find cobbles being used in construction, the binder is usually something like mortar. So for this game, consider these blocks here to be cobblestones mixed with mortar to make this, okay? Now, if we have something like this, okay? Again, this is nothing but cobblestones and mortar, which means these are not supports supporting this roof. No, in fact, if you want supports supporting this roof, you would do something like this. Whoops. Where you have solid stone across, or something like this. That's a support. Or if you still wanted to do cobblestone, you could do something like this, which is actually something that we see in the American Southwest. In fact, something we see in the American Southwest is something like this, okay, where you have like a little cobblestone type of a base with a log going straight up and then a log coming across. That is something we see. However, this is not a support. This is cobblestone and mortar hanging off of the roof, which means over time, this will end up here. Okay? Okay. That's why when I was deconstructing the tunnels underneath the Desert Temple, I was bringing down these parts here like they fell, right? Like that. Now, the big question, of course, you're asking is, well, if this isn't a support, right, and it fell, actually here, let's do this. So if that's not a support and it fell and it's here, how come the roof is still standing? Well, okay, so let's say we tear down the whole roof. Okay, well then what about the walls? The walls should come down too. So there's that. And you get the point that I'm trying to make, right? So if we do all of this, well, there's nothing really left of the previous structure. So I picked a time frame somewhere between total destruction and pristine, and that's what I went for. So that's why I dropped parts of the cobblestone that was up underneath the ceiling down onto the ground without taking the whole ceiling down with it as well. To demonstrate this, if you've ever been in an old rundown house, a lot of times you'll find pieces of the ceiling on the floor, but the roof is still intact. Or you'll find parts of the roof have caved in, but the majority of the roof is still there. That's because it hasn't fallen all the way down. So those of you who were in the comments talking about how the cobblestone is a structure or a support and I shouldn't be tearing those down, no, that's going to fall apart because that's literally cobblestone and mortar. And if anyone was wondering, because this was also in the comments of how I went about taking down parts or deciding what parts should be taken down versus what parts should be staying up, I just went with my best guess based on my experience in the real world and seeing real ruins. So if it didn't feel right to me, then it didn't stay in where it should be. Or if it felt like it should fall, then it fell. So yes, I did sort of make it up as I went along, but it was more of a feel like, oh, is this something I've seen in the real world before? Does this make sense? Yes, it does. And that's why I was able to do that. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get all that to fall. There we go. Let's go ahead and ruin this. So the thing about the desert temple is most of this is made out of sandstone. Sandstone, much like cobblestone, well, actually sandstone's a lot like brick. You can get chunks of sandstone and sort of build them up and use like a mortar binder type of a deal with it, and you get stuff like this, okay? But over time, it will fall down and sort of crumble away, much like cobblestone. So let's go ahead. Well, here, let's go ahead and remove this first so I can kind of get in and out. Let's go ahead and just sort of look around here. So we've got, what is this? Sandstone floors. We got some sand in here. I'm going to assume that that sand is degraded sandstone. And that's about it. Okay. And then, of course, we've got terracotta, orange terracotta. What is this? Cut sandstone. Oh, so this is sort of like, big blocks of sandstone. Okay. Well, first things first, let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So here's the thing about the TNT that's under this floor. TNT over time, dynamite over time, becomes more volatile. Well, not more volatile, it becomes unstable. Things like pressure fluctuate or temperature fluctuations, I guess pressure, humidity, stuff like that makes TNT a little more susceptible to exploding. So with that being said, let's go ahead and blow it up. Okay. So there we have it. That's what would have happened eventually with this. So there's this big giant cavern under here that it blew up into. Wow, it really took out a whole bunch. Oof, wow, and it's all a bunch of water under here. Okay, well, can't help that. That's it's done. So let's get out of here. Okay. Now that's one big, I guess, I don't know what you would call it. Sort of just like a big old tube, just sort of going straight down. So that eventually will have fallen. So let's go ahead and we will put that there. That's pretty much all we're going to do with that. Some of this stuff is still kind of hanging on. It probably would have fallen. I'm not going to worry too much about that. However, some of this we are going to turn into stairs. So let's go ahead and get some stairs. The big thing is that this top portion would probably collapse in over time, which would then fall down there. So okay, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so the top has sort of collapsed in. That's looking really good. Let's go into the second layer now. So down here. So what I want to do here is some of these areas like this that don't really have much in the way of support. I really want to, yeah, something like that. There we go. It's sort of just falling in. There we are. Something like that. That looks pretty good. Let's get that to fall there, that to fall there, that to fall on top of that, and that to go there. Okay, so far that looks great. Let's talk about the towers real quick. So these towers are hollow. Lovely. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and do that. Whoops. There we are. So this is, I mean, pretty much there, right? So a lot of ruins in the desert sort of collapse in a little bit, but for the most part, structurally, they're doing all right. So what I want to do is I want to sort of crumble some of these corners and stuff on this. And I think what I also want to do is I want to take red sand and replace some of this terracotta with red sand, or at least put some holes in it, and probably do something like this, right? Or something like that, showing damage. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so yeah, there you go. Looking pretty good. Now, the big thing is, of course, is that we need to fill up a lot of this with sand because sand would have blown in. So first and foremost, let's just go ahead and do that. And let's fill, like, let's say that with sand and a lot of this with sand. Okay, there you have it. A lot of the structure is still intact because it's a dry climate with not a lot of erosion other than wind and the occasional rain and I don't know, maybe seismic activity, but most of this stuff is still relatively intact, though I probably would bury it a little bit more. Yeah, maybe a little bit more. But most of these are actually buried in the world anyways, and so, you know, it is what it is. But this is about what I would expect a desert temple to kind of look like if I came across it. It's a little more degraded than I would like. You know, maybe I went a little overboard with it, but I think it gets the point across. I think it looks pretty good. So yeah, let me know what you think. See you next time.